My opinion on Gamergate 2 has been kind of clear at this point. I am in support of it, but I don't like the grifters. I don't like people like making daily content on it, talking about Sweet Bee being incorporated all the time. There are other aspects that really need to be addressed, right? Specifically the fact that if video game journalism is corrupt, which it is, like we've been able to prove that conclusively, then that means that like all of their review scores, all of their Metacritic scores, all of their reviews, all their game coverage, and especially their award shows are defunct, right? I do think this is the major thing that I want Gamergate to accomplish this year, right? The main goal, I would think, is we need to get rid of the Game Awards, okay? Like we need to set it up so that like nobody takes them seriously, nobody respects them, nobody wants to like talk about them at all because that's been the thing for the past couple of years, right? Especially since like Baldur's Gate 3 won last year. Well, it was given an award by corrupt journalists. But like, whenever you talk about Baldur's Gate 3 or you try to criticize it or you talk about how it's not like a very good game and how it was outclassed by like several other games, on Nintendo hardware, every single time like some soy boy or someone with like a little anime girl avatar will come in and try to be like, oh, don't you know? It's won a Game of the Year award. Are you disagreeing with the entire gaming industry? Yes! I've been doing that for 20 years. Well, actually, more like 15, but like 15 years. I've been talking about this. How video game journalists do not know anything about video games. They cannot cover them, they cannot play them, and they certainly cannot evaluate which game is the hallmark achievement for that year. I have never taken Game Awards seriously. I've never taken the Game of the Year award seriously, right? I've always spoken out about it. I've always been vocal about the Game Awards have been a joke. I covered them every year to like emphasize what a joke they were. But with 2023, in recent years, you have a certain demographic of people who want to take them seriously. Why? Because without them, Baldur's Gate 3 has nothing. That is the reality we find ourselves in now, where Baldur's Gate 3 is getting mogged by Zelda, by Mario, by Pokemon, by Fire Emblem Engage, right? And yet you don't really see anybody like really acknowledge it, right? All anybody can do is just say like, "Oh, I won the Game Award," but like, the reality is the Game Awards were rigged. The entire show was rigged. Alan Wake 2, like all they can talk about is like, "Oh, it's one of the best games of the year. Oh, it was hugely successful. It only sold like 1 million copies and it had like a $70 million budget." Okay, that game only made money because Remedy is like a big associate of like the ESG fund. Like Remedy is an example of everything wrong with the DEI like agenda, right? Like they got a bunch of money by throwing in a bunch of diversity in that game, right? They that is what Remedy has been doing over the past couple of years, and I do think that's like what's been happening with the Game Awards. As of last year, is that like they're just shoving in diversity without like talking about actually good games. Like you saw like Neil Druckmann on stage, you saw Sean Murray on stage, you saw Kojima on stage, who's become kind of a joke in the community nowadays, right? Like you saw all these people that the industry wants to push as like major gaming auteurs and like big names in the industry, but the reality is quite different. Nobody likes these people. Nobody cares about them. Nobody plays their games. Nobody remembers them fondly, especially in the case of like Neil Druckmann, one of the biggest. Like, just look at what happened at the Global Awards, right? He won an award for best game adaptation at like the Game Awards, right? For The Last of Us, which was also rigged, by the way. That should have gone to the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which was way more successful and high quality, right? He won that award, went to the Golden Globes, and like nobody there knew who he was. Nobody cared. Like there was that like really funny like clip that surfaced online of him like going up like in a suit, like how they go up and like expect the photographers to take photos of him. Not a single person took his photo. Right? Nobody. There were no camera flashes. Like he is a joke in Hollywood, right? Nobody cares about Druckmann, right? And that was with like the biggest like nepotistic like IP in like the gaming industry right now. Like I don't think anything has been pushed as hard as The Last of Us. Not even Baldur's Gate 3, and yet like this guy was shoved into like the movie making world and was just ignored. Even Kojima has more credibility than he does. Because at least there are people in Hollywood who play games and know that what he does is great. Like nobody who has played more than 5 games in their lives have ever said like, oh, I think Neil Druckmann is top 5 game creators of all time. Nobody thinks that. Nobody. Druckmann is a pleb. Like to the point where like people legit believe that like Amy Hennig wrote the original Last of Us instead of him. That's not true, by the way. Amy Hennig also sucks. But like my point is my point is that like we need to stop allowing people to praise the Game Awards. They were never credible, they were never relevant. They are controlled by the same game journalists that we hate. Why exactly should we pay attention to them ever at any point, right? And the reality is that this year that people really wanted to support them, right? Because they really wanted like Baldur's Gate 3 to win over Zelda. Well, guess what? You just enabled video game journalism corruption, right? Because you weren't willing to acknowledge that award was rigged. I came out and like continued calling the Game Awards rigged even after, Breath of the Wild won in 2017, right? I've always come out and said that like, yeah, like there should be more Nintendo games up there. There should be more Nintendo nominations. There should be more Nintendo Ws, right? But instead they're talking about all this stuff that nobody cares about. I think the only thing about 2023 is that like they went full mask off on what they're trying to do there, right? They're trying to become the Oscars, like pushing bad games in order to try to warp like society's opinions on certain things. And it's just not going to work, right? Like people were willing to go along with it this time because I do think this is true. People hate Nintendo more than they hate wokeness. Like this is something I've been talking about a lot lately, but like I haven't been talking about it, but I've been like kind of alluding to it. Like it does feel as if like if given the choice between like the woke gaming industry and Nintendo, everybody's going to choose the woke gaming industry all the time, right? Because the Nintendo hate is so ingrained into the culture. Like it's unthinkable to side with Nintendo on anything for like the vast majority of people, unless you're like me and have like completely broken the conditioning and taken the red pill, and completely just accepted that Nintendo is superior and that the only way for this industry to be salvaged is by imitating Nintendo's methodology, their hardware, their software, their business model, right? All of it's superior than like everyone else. And yet we're in this weird situation where everybody likes to pretend the opposite, that Nintendo is behind the rest of the industry, that they aren't competitive, that they can't produce good games, that they aren't winning, they aren't capable of producing Game of the Year award winners, right? And the Game Awards is a big facilitator of that. They are the ones, like aggressively downplaying games like Tears of the Kingdom, games like Super Mario Wonder, games like Fire Emblem Engage, right? Cereza and the Lost Demon, right? Like there were so many like amazing games that came out last year on Nintendo Switch that went completely passed up by the Game Awards, right? And to me, like that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jeff Keighley is a fraudster. Like, everyone he's involved with, the journos, the businesses, like, they all need to be condemned for what they've done, right? Essentially. Like, this is the next big step for the gaming community is that we need to start treating the Game Awards like the Oscars and stop thinking of them as being some like arbiter of what is and isn't good. If you want Gamergate to succeed, you're going to have to deal with all of the methods that game journalists use to control the gaming population, right? You have to eliminate Metacritic. You have to eliminate the game awards. You have to like stop, get rid of the editorials and like the Twitter accounts and like just the damage control. Like you have to address these things that nobody else is talking about. Only then will the high quality, good video games rise to the top and we can start talking about good Nintendo games once again. Play Nintendo.